Hello, everybody. Welcome to Go With The Flow. This is not the name of that show. Whoa, let's try that one again. Rewind that tape back. Let's just start this one all fresh and over. We'll edit all this out in post-production, folks. Have no fear. Welcome to Cover 4 Live, presented by Georgia Farm Bureau. My name is Brandon Adams. That part I'm sure of. The show at this point in time, they all kind of run together. But as I look on the screen in front of me here, as I broadcast once again, day number 97, it seems, broadcasting here from my home, I see Connor Riley. I see Jeff Sintel. In fact, let's go ahead and give Jeff a quick shout out here. Certainly he gets the award tonight for the most festive look. Beautiful tree behind him. I'm always in favor of that. But also a real fun Griswold themed sweater there. Jeff, looking good. Let's give folks a chance to hear from you and maybe move yourself closer to your camera so folks can see that for themselves.
So welcome tonight on here. We're here tonight on Before the Hedges. I'm Jeff Sintel.
Yeah,
we're talking about.
It's about right.
Just trying to keep in tandem with you, brother. So it's Griswold family Christmas. Maybe I can expense this sweater now that I was going to go for a neighborhood Christmas party or whatever. Maybe I can expense it now because it has showed up on the world famous Cover 4 Live. Maybe I'll get an Adidas deal like my buddy down there, Mike Griffith. How are you doing, Mike?
Yeah, Mike, you look like Dustin Johnson. Like you dress up like Dustin Johnson for Halloween.
Yeah, no, I've just been out doing a little exercise and walking, and I thought, we're all friends here, so let's take a peek into the real life. In other words, you forgot we were doing the show. Is that the translation of that? No. I've just been hustling around. It's a busy time of year. No pomp and circumstance. This is just a live look inside the real me.
Well, I want to start with this. A little bit of a combination of things for the next few days for Georgia. The game against Missouri, the start of the early signing period after that, and just as we get ready to come on the air tonight, really a fun video from Georgia coach Kirby Smart with a wink and a nod about the dog search for a barber. Of course, that's what five-star linebacker Xavier Sorey is kind of known as. He was kind of shouted out as the barber when he got his All-American Bowl jersey. Jeff actually talked about this on DawgNation Daily when he appeared one day this week, that that's kind of the way that Xavier Sorey kind of sees himself there. And Georgia looking for a barber for its new barbershop here. Boy, hard not to take this as a little bit of a nod in the direction of Sorey, I would say. And I want to read you this tweet because I thought this is a pretty good tweet from a DawgNation Daily listener and viewer who says that if Kirby Smart's going to start dropping hints like this when it comes to videos for commits, it would be a whole new recruiting level. And I agree with Montez on that, who's the one that tweeted that out, that there's something kind of fun about videos like this. I would say referencing Sorey. Georgia obviously can't do that by name, but in a year in which you can't visit, you got to find some way to do it kind of creatively. And it would seem here to me that that's exactly what Georgia has done here in relationship to Sorey, which I think is pretty fun, Jeff.
Yeah, Brandon, it brings to my mind name, image, and likeness. What can they do when it says to be continued, and then maybe the guy signs and becomes a Georgia Bulldog, potentially in about another 6-7 days? Wow, all of a sudden you could start really marketing that type of thing. And Connor, I'm going to tee the ball up for you in our pre-show meeting. And folks, our pre-show meetings probably take about 17 seconds before we go live, but my man Connor had a really good take on a potential really cool thing should Xavier Sorey Jr. wind up between the hedges.
I mean, yeah, if he's wreaking havoc in the backfield and he's known to do a thing or two with his scissors there, why not call him Xavier Scissorhand Sorey? I think that's a nice little name. I will say, I don't know if this is the right time of year to be going getting a haircut. Some of you might have Christmas pictures to be taken around the corner. There's a pandemic out there. I don't know if it's necessarily safe to go to a barber shop right now. But I'm glad to see that Georgia's on the lookout for a barber when those eventually open up again.
And Connor, you're a little young for this. Maybe Mike Griffith remembers, but one of the great gimmicks of the WWF, back when it was the WWF in the 80s, was Brutus the Barber Beefcake. I mean, I love the idea of Xavier Sorey laying a big hit, pulling the helmet off and just cutting a lock right there on the field. I'm telling you, that was a great gimmick back in the 80s. I could absolutely see Sorey kind of bring the barber gimmick with him to UGA. I like the idea of that. And Mike, this is one of those things for Sorey, who's talked on social media this week about maybe using that final weekend to go to Florida. If you're Georgia, you got to try to get his attention some way. So if a video is what you do it in a year in which you can't really do much else other than videos these days, then why not pull out all the stops, right?
Yeah, you got to be creative, and certainly Kirby Smart's a guy that's proven to be a very effective recruiter. And take advantage of your social media, take advantage of your reach. And I'm with you. I like it. I think it's creative, and I think it gets the kids' attention, lets them know that they're thinking about them.
So let's just go do this open-ended here a little bit. We got a game on Saturday. We got signing period coming up after that. It's going to be a busy rest of December here for Georgia for the most part. Jeff, let me come back to you here on this. When you look at Sorey, he's out there. There's at least some threat of possibility still with Corey Foreman. Mason Smith, maybe more realistic than that. Certainly more realistic than that. Donovan Edwards, whatever's going to happen there. I mean, what's on your mind? And I'm not asking you to project the class necessarily, but when you look at those big dominoes and those big talking points over the next couple of days, overlapping the game on Saturday, from a recruiting standpoint, where are you on this at the moment?
So let me. I need an update because I know you guys follow the sports entertainment wagering. What's Georgia currently favored by against Mizzou?
Around 13 or so.
13.
I'm gonna say something. I guess I'm gonna say this. I think Georgia will do better on signing day than they do against Missouri, because for them to beat the performance on signing day coming up with what I think is about to happen, I think they're going to need to beat Missouri by about 35 or 40 points. That's how wow. Maybe Brandon, the next thinly veiled.
Couldn't even get a chortle there out of Brandon. He's just disappointed there.
No, I'm taking it all in. I'm trying to. First of all, I'm trying to process the analogy. But second of all, I'm taking it all in. It all sounds like good news to me.
So, Brandon, basically, I'm saying Georgia's going to do very good on National Signing Day, and for them to rival that against Missouri, they better win by 50.
That's good to hear. I love it.
Now, what about the next video? If they have something around the new football headquarters building, and they've got like a row of bricks, and then they got another guy with a little spatula and a shaping tool, just kind of laying those bricks together and building it. I think there's a term for that. Maybe a
mason. I like the idea of that. Mason? Yeah, masonry. Yeah.
So you got that one. You got that one. Good job.
I'm here for you and all of that. But Jeff, what's funny about this though is and a part of the reason why I'm processing all your optimism is because it's funny to go into Wednesday, and the thing that fans care about is not the guys who've been in the fold who make it official and sign. What people really care about are the guys that we don't know about, the unknown commodities and which decision would they make. And it's funny with Sorey, part of the reason why I would say that Georgia is referencing him in a video here is because it's not a given with him at the moment. And with Mason Smith, it's not a given. You may tell me that it's, greater than 50%, whatever else, but certainly there's a strong pull from at least two SEC teams in addition to Georgia there. Donovan Edwards, much the same way. It's kind of funny for the big names you're hopeful for Georgia, just as a layman looking in on this, I'm not quite sure that I would say that Georgia has necessarily a point spread lead for any of them, or maybe they do.
Yeah, Brendan, I think with this right here, you got to look at. I think the big thing for me that will become a storyline when it's time for us to write about it is, I think Kirby Smart was actually much more candid than I've known him to be. Normally, those things are like the nuclear launch codes in the football in terms of how many guys he wants to sign, how many mid-years he's going to have signed, and how that's going to wreak havoc a little bit on the 85. I mean, man, the numbers I think are only going to keep coming up. I don't even know if there will. I would even expect attrition perhaps on this current board. I don't know if you noticed this today, but a lot of folks on the DawgNation message board were worried about Dejan Nugget Warren sending some sentiments back and forth and some edits from Penn State right now. Of course, I hear Jackson State is also courting him very heavily as well to join that program. But there's other people that will speculate. There's certain position groups or there's certain spots on that board where Georgia may, if they have a lot of people wanting to come into the end, let's use some Christmas terminology, and say they need to make a lot of room at the end. 5-star here, 5-star there, another elite prize prospect, receiver, offensive playmaker, what have you. The numbers are this, Brandon. They got 20 dudes publicly committed, and I don't think they can hold in much more than 4 more, even if Kirby pulls his Kirby special and finds a scholarship under the cushions like some old discarded pennies or pocket lint or perhaps last year's lost Easter egg in the couch cushions.
Mike, let me bring you on this too, because you were with Kirby Smart this week, at least via Zoom. And, I don't think it's exaggerated when he talks about the numeric challenges they're facing. Now, they're going to figure it out because, as Jeff said, they always do. But this wasn't just posturing, hand-wringing from him, that Kirby's going to earn his money over the course of the next 6 days, whatever else, in determining how do you get everybody in who wants to be here, and for, as Kirby said, large number of people who really have nothing better to do than go ahead and enroll in college as a part of an early enrollee. How do you find room for all of them? That's a pretty big challenge that Smart's about to face, is it not?
Yeah, by my math, it's 78 juniors and below right now. That's with the seniors gone and the guys in the portal. And if you're talking about 85, how do you go from 78 to 65? I don't think there's going to be 13 juniors that go pro. So it's interesting, and the problem is, you might say, well, the seniors count through the spring. So there's overlap. So even though the seniors aren't going to count next year, they still count this year through the spring semester. So it's a bit of a mess. I mean, you saw today Notori Johnson in the transfer portal. Obviously, Dwan Mathis was in a couple of weeks ago. Earlier this week, a couple of receivers that don't play much. Georgia took a lick. Micaiah Tung put his name there in the transfer portal, and then Trey. Well, I mean, and then Trey Blunt's a guy they were high on early, and he's in the transfer portal now. So you got 4 guys that are in the transfer portal right now.
Disgusted.
Mike, I'm going to give you credit. The jokes are like a 5 or a 6, but your delivery is actually pretty good. So, I would say I'm going to allow it. I would say that the jokes, not great, but the delivery, you really committed to the gimmick, which I'm very much impressed with.
Brandon, these jokes, call it what it is. These jokes are notorious. They're absolutely notorious.
Well, we have to be better than this, guys. We have to be.
Well, you realize they are playing in the Show Me State this week, Brandon. So
that's right.
You got to get that. No, but you're right. I mean, how do you lose 13? Let's be honest. If you look at roster management, I mean, juniors are going pro. And some guys are losing scholars. Look, you wonder, is Amir White coming back? You wonder about William Poole, Latavius Brainy. I mean, Amir Speed. I mean, thanks, but here's your handshake and good luck to you. I mean, if you're not on the field right now, you've got to wonder. I mean, Georgia's got to continue to get these great players in, and to do that, they need some attrition, they need some turnover, and so I think there's probably going to be some very frank discussions with players, this week about their futures. And as far as seniors coming back, I think the only one that I would say is, well, there's a few. Okay. So Jermaine Johnson, I think you definitely would welcome him back with open arms. Devontae Wyatt, I think you would welcome him back. And I think Julian Rochester with the knee. So you got those 3 seniors. I think you would welcome them back. But there's a lot of those juniors, BA, that that I think will probably go pro anyway. I mean, I think Eric Stokes, I think Tyson Campbell, I think Zamir White ultimately. These are guys that I think will probably move on. Azeez Ojulari.
So, Connor,
I think the main thing, without name dropping a lot of those guys, I think the main thing to look for, for instance, I think Mike threw out a name in Amir Speed. Well, he's traveling, he's on the field at least for special teams. I think the names that I would point to would be the guys that aren't traveling, that have had 3 or more seasons there in Athens. The guys that maybe potentially look log jammed by a lot of guys. I tell you what, if Jermaine Johnson did come back with the expected exodus of Azeez Ojulari, I think that would maybe speak some things about, hey, it's time to get Nolan Smith on the field and kind of showcase him and kind of feature him. And also, a guy like Adam Anderson. I know there's a long list that Mike's going through there. I think Adam Anderson might leave to the Sunday League as a positive, when those draft grades come back. And if that should happen, I think Georgia's in the really big business if they're going to celebrate these guys leaving and developing in 3 years and getting to the NFL. Man, that Senior Bowl, I know Mike's really tied into it and covers that well, but I mean, Mike, it might end up 7-8 Bulldogs there, and I don't know if that's a lot, but that to me seems like a lot, because some schools have juniors go and they never make it unless they're graduated. And some guys have the big timers that don't go because they don't need to. But to me, to potentially see 8, maybe 8, at least 8 Bulldogs in the Senior Bowl, That's a pretty high number.
Yeah, you may be right about that. Pretty interesting to see. Connor, before we completely move off the subject of recruiting, I did want to find out from you just kind of what your outlook is heading towards next week. Do you agree with me that, maybe Georgia is the point spread favorite for Sorey, but I don't think I'd say that about Mason Smith necessarily, although I would say that Georgia has a chance to win. Donovan Edwards, similar level of intrigue. Corey Foreman, now Georgia's probably a fairly sizable underdog. Georgia has a chance to surprise some people and do well with those guys, but as it stands right now, in layman's terms, I don't know that you would necessarily cast Georgia as a large favorite for any of those open battles, would you?
No, but I think there are past examples of Georgia doing very well on signing day where going into it, it wasn't perceived that they were in the lead. I know 2 years ago, Nakobe Dean, I don't think anyone necessarily knew where exactly he was going to be, and I don't know if you would have forecasted him as a point spread favorite, but he ends up picking Georgia. Last year, Zach Evans signs with Georgia. Ultimately, he doesn't enter the class, but he signed and was going to commit to Georgia. That was something not very many people saw coming. Even Jermaine Burton came a little bit off the radar there. I know there was some chatter leading up to it, but with the way Kirby Smart has built his recruiting classes year over year, a lot of schools, Clemson, Ohio State, they do a lot of their work early. They want the hay in the barn before the season starts. Georgia has continuously made it a point where, hey, we'll wait you out and we'll wait for your senior year to finish, and then we'll come and close on you. And I think if they land a Sorey, if they land a Mason Smith, that would just be another example of that.
I guess what I'm saying, Jeff, here is that if Georgia does clean up starting Wednesday with some of those big names, this is not business as usual. Those are real contested recruitments with big boys in the SEC and big boys around the country that Georgia would have had to knock off to win those recruiting battles, even if it's just a handful of those. That this may feel like the same old Georgia year after year, racking up on National Signing Day, but that'd be a real 7-10 split, to use a bowling reference. That'd be a real tough split to get a couple of those guys, this week. I'm not saying it's not going to happen. I'm saying when it does happen, it's really a pretty impressive performance given how contested it is and how Georgia's had a hand tied behind its back because it hasn't been able to host these guys for visits.
Yeah, Brendan, I think to me that video that came out today, I think it shows a little bit of boldness by the staff because, here's the thing that's happening, and I can share this, is these guys need to know who's coming, who's early enrolling, so they can start these numbers rolling, so they can figure that out. So I don't know if anybody's been following social media, but there's certainly some very good tidings happening with, you see Lavassier Carroll tweeting out certain things. You see a lot of Georgia Bulldog commitments tweeting out certain things. I think the one thing I want to do, Brandon, for everybody here that's maybe only really leans into recruiting at this time of the year is I'm going to just set the table. I think the 4 names that's out there that everybody wants to see, I would say the 4 names pretty simply are Xavier Sorey, Donovan Edwards, Mason Smith, and I don't know, Brandon would probably want to throw Corey Foreman in there just because that's what Brandon does. But to me, I think the name is, Corey Foreman. I think that's just going to be really tough. But I think the last name is Terrion Arnold, who won't even decide until February the 3rd. But I think, Brendan, if you could take those 4 names or 4 of those 5 or all 5, let's just say this, Brendan, they get all 5 of those guys somehow, some way. They find an extra one. Somebody moves on that we didn't expect to move on. Considering the degree of difficulty of COVID-19 recruiting, is this the best possible recruiting year for Georgia ever?
It's as impressive as anything that's ever happened under Kirby Smart. It really would be. And really, if you talk about even just multiple names off that list, you've talked about a pretty good close, or a very good close to what's already been a really good class for UGA. I don't think you have to get all 5 of those guys to feel like, you've had a great success. I feel like you just got to pick, a handful out of the 5, and I think that Georgia's closed really strong with that in mind. Let me go to the game itself on Saturday for a minute, Mike. I want to bring you back in this conversation. I think you and I have talked about this already this week. I think that Missouri's a real team. They're ranked in the top 25, the college football playoff selection committee's top 25. They've been on a tear playing games at FARO Field in Columbia, Missouri, and yet I think they get Georgia's best shot on Saturday. I think that Georgia's itching to play. I think that Georgia wants to really play a punctuation mark type game here in December to kind of prove what Georgia's all about near the end of the year. I think that Georgia's maintained, the best I can tell anyway, a pretty strong level of focus. I'll be surprised if Georgia doesn't play well against Missouri on Saturday. And I haven't always said that for every game this year, but I sort of get a sneaking suspicion Missouri gets UGA's full focus and its best shot on Saturday.
Yeah, I'd agree with you, Brandon. I think that, I can see where there's advantages for both teams, that the game was delayed in the sense that, Missouri's had a little bit more time and they've gained some momentum, winning 5 out of the last 6 and 91 points in the last 2 games. But I think this Georgia offense, is the defensive coordinator from Missouri was saying earlier today in that story I've got up on DawgNation. He said this offense that they're seeing from Georgia is a lot different than the one they saw against Florida with Stetson Bennett and Dwan Mathis. And they say, hey, they got a trigger man. And, obviously JT is a guy that can go deep. And I think that's what Missouri's going to do. I think they're going to challenge him to go deep. And you looked at the Missouri-Kentucky game, and really Missouri was as dominant over Kentucky as Florida was in many ways, and Georgia for that matter, because Missouri was able to shut down that run game of Kentucky, which is really easier said than done, especially when Chris Rodriguez was out there, a Georgia high school player, somehow got away. Probably the best running back, next to Najee in the SEC this year. The fact that they were able to take away Kentucky's run game tells me they'll be able to erase Zamir White. I don't know if Milton's going to be ready to go. If he is, I don't see him getting, more than probably 4 or 5 carries. McIntosh, when he plays, usually gets 7 and 9. But you take away that Georgia run game, and I think we're going to see shades of Mississippi State with JT Daniels airing it out. And then the flip side is, to me, what I think ultimately decides it is, where's this Georgia defense? I think we would all say this has been a disappointing year for the Georgia defense, and their secondary has to step up, make some plays. A lot of money on the line for Eric Stokes and Tyson Campbell. And, so I think this is going to be a really big game for that secondary to potentially make some plays or not.
Denzel Snipes, by the way, on YouTube said, I was also confident before the Florida game, so he would prefer me not be confident ahead of the Missouri game. And I certainly understand where Denzel's coming from on that. But Connor, what Mike touches on at the end, I think is quite important here, is mystery and intrigue on the side of the Georgia offense, because it's just JT Daniels' 3rd game as a starter, and people are interested to see what he does. But the opportunity here for the Georgia defense to show that it can step up and stop a competent passing game, that's what Missouri's become in the second half of the season, after not getting that done against Alabama, not getting that done against Florida. No one's going to say Missouri's in the category of the 2 teams that I just mentioned. Missouri is a better, more proficient offense than most of what Georgia has played. Other than that, it is a chance for validation for the Georgia defense, I think, some on Saturday.
I don't know. I think given the performances that you saw against Alabama and Florida, that's going to define the Georgia defense. If they go and shut out Missouri, that doesn't, to me, change anything the way this Georgia defense is going to be talked about from a national standpoint. They still, in the 2 biggest games of the year, didn't necessarily get that done. One thing I will say on Missouri, Mike made some points there. A week ago against Arkansas, this Missouri team has seen a lot of attrition on its defensive line there. They're not the same defense that they were when they played Kentucky a month and a half ago. They gave up 292 rushing yards to an Arkansas team that was playing a backup quarterback there. I know, BA, you complimented the job Kendall Briles did there, but I do think Georgia should be able to move the ball on this Missouri defense quite a bit. I know they shut out Vanderbilt, but that Vanderbilt team had quit on the season at that point. So I expect, again, 13 – Missouri, again, they're going to make you earn it. It's not going to be like the South Carolina game where you can just walk in there, or the Vanderbilt game where you can just walk in there and walk out with an easy win. If Georgia's not sharp and focused from the start, Missouri is going to make this a not very fun game to play in. But I think having 2 weeks to prepare for this, having that extra week off to heal up, to get Jordan Davis back, to potentially get Kendall Milton back, I think that's going to help the Bulldogs on Saturday.
Jeff, what do you think about the game?
I think this game, I don't know if I'm going to see the pass happy Mississippi State thing. I think Georgia probably wants to establish its run game a little bit more. I don't know if we see a 400-yard, 30 out of 40 night for JT Daniels. It's one of those games where I really think Missouri's a lot better than a lot of people think, man. If we look at the schedule, if we look at the contenders and pretenders that Georgia has faced so far this year, are we all in agreement that this is probably the 3rd best team Georgia has faced all season?
No.
Is it close?
I think Auburn.
Yeah, I think Auburn's still better than Missouri, but I think Missouri's probably the 4th best team Georgia's faced.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Now, here's the thing. When you add in travel, when you add the week off, when you add in it's going to be like 28 to 40 degrees or something like that. That's what the weathermen I know on my phone tell me. So all of a sudden, we know Georgia football can't throw the ball in the rain, but can they throw the ball in the snow? That will be an interesting dynamic to see and to figure out. I just think, here's what I always come down to. Who's got more players? I think Jordan Davis in that lineup makes Georgia not all the way what it was earlier in the year, but that's a big start and a big help in making Connor Bazelak and that Missouri offense very one-dimensional.
It's Cover 4 Live, presented by Georgia Farm Bureau. That's Jeff Sintel. Cool holiday sweater for him tonight. Connor Riley, Mike Griffith here as well. And we're all brought to you by our friends at Georgia Farm Bureau. Georgia Farm Bureau, as we head towards the holiday season, they're working just as hard as ever in communities just like yours all across our great state, taking care of folks when it comes to the agricultural community, really showing support for Georgia's farmers living, working, and playing in communities all across our great state. Also helping people save money when it comes to the home, auto, and life insurance. You can find out more for this yourself by checking out gfbinsurance.com. That's gfbinsurance.com. And when you hang out, when you find a little bit about the folks at Georgia Farm Bureau, you will find out to be true what I've been saying all season long, which is Georgia Farm Bureau is always the home team. And they are there for you all across our great state, supporting the agricultural community and helping save a whole bunch of folks a lot of money on their insurance. And that is certainly a good thing. I think the most fascinating story of the week in a lot of respects has been what's going on with former five-star recruit, LSU signee, pretty impressive freshman, ARIK Gilbert, who has officially opted out. And that was the language that Ed Orgeron first used. And now that's kind of the official statement from LSU. But it persists the notion that Gilbert will eventually transfer. In fact, that's what his mentor, one of his mentors anyway, former Georgia wide receiver Terrence Edwards, said today on DawgNation Daily that he believes that Gilbert likely will eventually transfer out of LSU. And it's after that I think things start getting very interesting. Mike, how realistic do you think it is that if Gilbert leaves LSU, he would come to Georgia, given the fact that he had a chance to go to UGA before and chose to go elsewhere?
Yeah, I'd give Georgia better than a 50-50 shot at him. He wants to play closer to home, and this offense with Todd Monken is, geared to, throw the ball a lot more. And I think the takeaway is he wants to be closer to home. And if you want to be closer to home, I think Georgia's the right fit. Georgia can do a lot of different things with that ace formation. You put Darnell Washington on one side, and obviously Gilbert can do a lot of special things. I mean, he's technically a tight end, but we all know that he can really split out wide. He was LSU's number 2 receiver. So I'm going to put it at 75% that he ends up at Georgia. What
do you think, Jeff?
You know me, Brandon. I know you keep trying. I don't do percentages, but I would not. I don't think that is as clear and as clarity as what others do. What I know, Mike's got a feeling on this one. I know maybe he's at Vegas right now, getting ready to play blackjack, or maybe getting ready to play baccarat or craps or whatever. But to me, I do think there's something there. I think I'm not crossing any boundaries by saying there's something there. But to me, I just don't understand it. I don't understand why he would choose Georgia. And I guess that might get some frowns on this panel or frowns on the feed. But, I automatically, my mind went to remembering that story, remembering that ultimately why he didn't choose Georgia, even though Georgia recruited him well, they did a great job for him. I just don't think the fit was there at Georgia. I just don't think my mind went 2 ways. I think when he actually decided his decision, his number 2 was actually Alabama. Clemson was in there a little bit too. And when you talk about homesick, I mean, AAA, which is a great sponsor of, some of the things we do here. The AAA roadmap tells me that it's only about 3 hours to Tuscaloosa from the Atlanta area. And it's maybe only about 2.5, 3 hours to Clemson as well. I think that's a lot closer and a lot cozier than Baton Rouge to Atlanta and his family and his loved ones and everything else like that. Puncher's chance, yeah, certainly Georgia can recruit. They have some type of way where they can get a lot of these guys and have them thinking, still feeling great about the way they were recruited by Georgia. Maybe he sees big things. Maybe he sees what's happening with JT Daniels. But, for me, these young men got to think about what's best for their future and what's the best fit. And for him and his remarkable skill set, let's say he did choose Georgia, I think he would to me, be one of the most viable receivers in the program, right up there with George Pickens, especially the way he runs his routes and the way he's just a master at his craft. Everybody calls him a tight end, but I mean, in Georgia's offense, hypothetically, I would see ARIK Gilbert outside, and I would see guys like Darnell Washington and Brock Bowers inside. Everybody forgets about Brock Bowers and Darnell Washington in this story. I mean, Georgia's already elevating its tight end room and its tight end position considerably with all that. That's simply what I feel there about Gilbert and Georgia right now.
And listen, I'm not fishing for what I want to hear, but I will say in response to that I would assume that the Georgia offense probably has a slightly better brand now than it did a year ago. I think this offense, frankly, even prior to JT Daniels becoming the starting quarterback, was functioning better under Todd Monken than it did last year under James Coley. Now, does that completely change the trajectory of what Alabama could have sold a year ago, what LSU did sell back when Joe Burrow and Joe Brady were kind of still at the helm there for LSU? Obviously, I'm not saying the Georgia situation is as fully formed as that is, but Jeff, you would have to say that Georgia has a better offensive reputation now than it did last season. I mean, we've had receivers going over 100 yards for UGA this year, something that did not happen very much last year. You've had, freshmen like Jermaine Burton kind of getting involved in the offense in a way that feels a little foreign, previously to Georgia on this. The UGA offensive reputation has been enhanced a little bit, hasn't it?
I guess a little bit. I would agree with you on a little bit, but you can flip around and what Kearis Jackson is doing right now, that kind of mirrors what George Pickens did a year ago. And then what Dominic Blaylock did last year. You see Jermaine Burton doing that. I think the big thing that I would have thought that would have enhanced Georgia's chances would be more catches for Darnell Washington. I think he's made 3 or 4 really big catches this year, but I think those are the only 3 or 4 catches he's made. He's got 2 catches, right, Connor? And both of them one was 25 and one was 38 yards, I believe. So, he's been a all or nothing type option. And really, who's hit him on both times? That was Stetson Bennett, if my memory serves correctly.
Yeah, but the problem with that, though, Connor, is, and I say that someone has great respect for Washington and what he can be as a player, in the realm of 5 stars, sometimes you have pretty significant separation amongst 5 stars. And I said this all throughout the process. ARIK Gilbert was just a different kind of 5-star tight end than what Darnell Washington was because of the way that Gilbert was used in the Marietta offense, catching passes from a quarterback who had played in the SEC. He was just a more seasoned pass-catching weapon. So from that standpoint, I think it's almost unfair to even compare Gilbert to Washington. Washington may end up as good a player as Gilbert eventually, but Gilbert started off just a little more polished than what I would say that Washington was, and that's, I think, been proven out here during their freshman seasons.
Well, to be fair, there was also an injury, right, Connor? I mean, we think back to Darnell Washington. You saw him at the All-Star camp, and he was a little overweight, and then he had the injury, right?
Yeah, that's certainly a point to bring up there. I think the analogy I might use here is it's ARIK Gilbert is Trevor Lawrence. He's a generational prospect. I think Darnell Washington is maybe a more JT Daniels type 5-star quarterback where obviously he has the measurables and size and things like that, but he's not necessarily going to step in right away and be the player that Gilbert is. I will say we've gotten this far in the discussion. If he transfers to Georgia next year, there's a chance he's not eligible to play because as of right now, the SEC still has their intra-conference transfer rules where if you transfer from one school to another within the SEC, Cade Mays from Georgia to Tennessee, you would have to sit out a year. Now, yes, the SEC did waive that this year, but it doesn't necessarily, it's not a slam dunk that rule gets completely wiped off the books here going forward. And I asked Kirby Smart about it this week. And, quite frankly, he doesn't sound all that gung-ho about getting rid of it because I think in the aggregate, Georgia's probably hurt more often by that rule than necessarily it would be benefiting this one time with Gilbert.
Well, one thing to consider here, on Gilbert is by LSU self-imposing this bowl ban, that opens the door because that is one of the qualifiers that allows guys to get out of there quickly without the 1 year is if the program does not go to the postseason. So the fact that LSU has recently done that has opened the door for that immediate eligibility.
See, now this is what I need more of. Mike's trying to be part of the solution as opposed to being part of the problem. Tell me reasons why it can't happen. Mike's giving me reasons why it can happen.
Well, Connor's right. I mean,
we're not Americans. We're Americans.
Yeah. Well, but Connor's. We don't know what's going to happen in January, but as of right now, if somebody were to get this done right now, they would still need to get that waiver. But because of the postseason, the fact that LSU's given themselves this bowl ban, Connor, this opens the door. This is one of the qualifiers, this and coaching change.
But if he transfers,
and there may be one of those on the way eventually too. Sorry, go ahead.
But
that's a chortle. That's a chortle.
If he transfers after the season, and I don't necessarily think this is going to be a quick transfer solution right now, given he just decided to opt out. If he does choose to transfer after the season, does that bowl ban still affect them next year, given LSU won't have a bowl ban for next season?
It's a fair question. I don't know the answer. Go ahead.
Yeah, Mike. It would be one of the reasons he had transferred out. That's why he would have to be in the portal before the end of the year.
Here's what I'll say. I have no idea about any of this other than the most Georgia thing ever would be a turnstile of Georgia players leaving the program, all getting immediate eligibility everywhere they go, all across the fruited plain. And the one player that Georgia really needs here, in the case of ARIK Gilbert, not getting him the year after a lot of this kind of stuff happened. That, to me, would be a pretty significant, only in Georgia type thing to have take place.
I have a question for you, BA.
Yeah.
And should ARIK Gilbert be eligible? Because I believe you and I both sort of batted this around. We didn't necessarily think Cade Mays should have been immediately eligible when he transferred to Tennessee.
No, I don't think he should be eligible, but that's not what I'm going to argue. I mean, like the principled argument is no, I really kind of don't think he should be.
As long as you acknowledge the principle, that's all that I care about.
There. Yeah. In principle, I really don't think it's true. But if I can get ARIK Gilbert, I definitely want him, and I don't mind pointing out the hypocrisy. And Connor, I'll give you credit because I think you asked Kirby Smart this week, and I actually really like Kirby's candor on this. And it's one of the reasons why you got to have strong SEC leadership, because coaches will only argue what benefits them. Blowhards doing streaming video shows will only argue what benefits them or their favorite team. But at some point in time, it's got to be more than just self-interested arguments, which I think is kind of what dominated this discussion around the time that Cade Mays was granted the immediate eligibility.
Oh, yeah. Jeremy Pruitt doesn't have to worry about the same issue of, well, if a player leaves Tennessee, he might not necessarily be good enough to go play elsewhere in the SEC. Whereas I think you look at schools like Georgia, you look at a school like Alabama, and even a school like LSU. I know this year might not be a good example, but more often than not in the aggregate, those guys are going to be hurt by sort of the SEC getting rid of this one, or getting rid of having to sit out if you transfer in conference, because the reality is their players are just a lot better. And you look at a guy like Otis Reese, where he's not playing at Georgia this year, but he goes to Ole Miss, he's a starter right away. And that's going to end up, I think, in the long run, hurting teams like Georgia, hurting teams like Alabama. So that's why I do think Kirby gave the sort of measured response that he did, even though, as you point out, if ARIK Gilbert, you can get him, you stand to benefit from it, and that might not be the worst thing for that one-time scenario.
It's a Cover 4 Live presented by Georgia Farm Bureau. Connor Riley, Jeff Sintel, Mike Griffith. Jeff, I saw your hand is raised. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, this is going to be my go-to signal to kind of keep it going. I need a 20-second timeout. I'm sorry if I didn't give you complete and utmost attention during the Missouri ball game question. I guess I was trying to mimic what the Georgia fan base might feel about this Missouri game on Saturday. But there was really good business at hand. Brandon, I know exactly what you're doing on 4 p.m. Eastern time on National Signing Day. I was trading texts with someone that I was trading texts with 5-star defensive tackle Mason Smith. Right. His decision will take place at 4 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Central on National Signing Day. So there's going to be a lot of terrible production in the state of Georgia right around 3:30 p.m. on Wednesday, December the 16th.
That's great to hear, man. What an exciting way to really right there in kind of what you think of as almost like the prime time of that signing day, right there in that kind of late afternoon spot. Great time for Mason Smith to be going. Cannot wait to see how all of that plays out. And Jeff, since you just mentioned something there, let me kind of keep it going with you here for a minute, because one of the things you kind of wanted to do on tonight's show and make this our next topic here on Cover 4 Live presented by Georgia Farm Bureau, kind of a look at where we are at the season right now. This is unfortunately, as Connor, I think, alluded to earlier, the season that right now for the Dogs on the field will be remembered more for what didn't happen as opposed to what did, the losses to Alabama and Florida. But even within that, there are moments, sometimes within the moments. What's the most prominent thing you think that's happened for Georgia this far this season? When you think about the 2020 season on the field, what do you think?
I guess what started this topic for me, Brandon, is I keep going back to the Alabama game. And Alabama seems imposing. They seem like the juggernaut. They seem like the best team in college football to me, bar none. Alternate opinions are allowed in this fun, friendly fire forum. Brandon, let's remember that was Bama with Jalen Waddle and that was Georgia with Stetson Bennett. And Georgia was leading that game at the half. And I think they were leading that game at least knee deep into the third quarter, maybe calf deep into the third quarter. And I just wonder, I guess it's unraveling. I guess it's the injuries, but taking that thing all the way back to there, man, that just seems like such a long time ago how Georgia, I guess that's LeCount, and I guess that's Davis, and I guess that's some relative health by a lot of guys on that team. But I guess my mind goes to this, and some people might think that's being a tortured Georgia fan. But you just sit there and you go, what would Georgia look like this fall if they ever had JT, Jordan, and Richard LeCount on the field at the same time? That kind of changes the dynamic of possibility here for this football team.
Yeah, Mike, I don't know where this lands with you, but what I'll tell you as, someone who's lived and died with both these games, the game that I would want back as a fan is the Florida game. That's the game where I thought there was real path. And I don't just say that as a Gator hater. I thought there was a real path towards victory there that day, and Georgia just couldn't quite take advantage of it. The Alabama game, I just don't think it was there. In the first half, Georgia was obviously kind of, throwing haymakers right there with Alabama. But I just think Steve Sarkisian's system this year has just worked too well. And for someone last year, I'm talking about myself, who just praised Joe Brady at every turn, systemically what Sarkisian's done this year has been every bit as effective. The way in which that he just always finds ways to get these receivers open with the routes they run. They kind of, play off of each other. There's a way that Georgia could have made the Alabama game closer, Mike, but I don't know there's a way they could have won it. Florida game, I do feel a little differently about where, that's a game, even dealing with the injuries, I thought Georgia had its chances to win. I just don't feel that way with the Alabama game.
Yeah, and that was Stetson Bennett for sure. I guess
I don't think it was JT Daniels either. I don't. Yeah, I think if Georgia scored 50, Alabama would have just scored 60. I just don't think they could have stopped him that day.
Yeah, I disagree with you there. I think with a good quarterback, they could have beat him. If Stetson could score 24 in the first half, including a turnover in the red zone. But we'll never see that game. We'll never know. But to your point, the Florida game, absolutely. I mean, Florida scored 6 points in the second half. And, the Florida fans say, Dan Mullen was just taking it easy. No, he wasn't. They threw the ball 17 times in the second half. Florida was trying to score. And Mark Webb dropped a pick six, or that game would have been even closer. And Dwan wasn't ready to play. And Stetson Bennett with a shoulder injury was even worse than Stetson Bennett without a shoulder injury.
Oh, come on.
They were historically bad, 9 of 29 passing with 3 interceptions. I mean, I don't know how you can gift wrap that.
We don't have to beat him up, though. I mean, we don't have to beat him up.
Well, he was bad. He was bad that day. I don't know how you. That's not beating anybody up. That's
we don't have to belabor the point.
Oh, well, but we're talking about why they didn't win, Brandon. And the quarterback play was exactly why they didn't win. It was horrible.
I'm just saying there's a way to say things. But the point here is, I don't think there was any kind of. I just don't think that opportunity existed, Connor, for Georgia in the Alabama game.
Yeah, which is why I think the most consequential moment of Georgia's season actually came before it ever played a game. I think it came back on September 2nd when Jamie Newman ultimately decided to opt out on the season. Obviously, as Mike sort of mentions there, the quarterback play was substandard at Georgia, I believe, for the first 6 games of the season. I believe it would have been, at the very least, better with Newman there. But him opting out when he did, already a week and a half, 2 weeks into fall training camp and having gone through the whole offseason there, he took away reps from other quarterbacks to get better. Georgia, I know, made a plan for Newman to be the starter. He would have been the starter week 1 against Arkansas. And him opting out really just, unfortunately, it set everything back this year, though. To end this on a more positive note, I think you look at all the things that could have gone wrong this season for Georgia. They have. You have the quarterback issue with Newman. JT Daniels isn't ready to start the season. You have a rash of injuries at the worst possible time before the Florida game, which determines whether or not you go to an SEC championship game. You have all that going on. You have bringing a new offensive coordinator in January, and then bang, offseason gets wiped out because of a pandemic. You have all that happen. Georgia's still a top 10 team and very likely going to end up playing in a premier New Year's Six bowl game. They might not get the opponent you necessarily want, but they're still going to be in there and in the upper echelon. I think that goes and speaks a lot to what Kirby Smart has built as far as what the floor for Georgia is here, because as popular as those Mark Richt comparisons were, if Mark Richt were the head coach of this Georgia team this year, it would look very different from where it is right now.
Mike, I do think Connor brings up a pretty good point when it comes to Jamie Newman, and Jeff referenced this a little earlier. You've covered the Senior Bowl for a long time. Aren't you fascinated by what Newman does to Senior Bowl as a way of maybe suggesting what Georgia could have had? Because no matter how you flavor the conversation, obviously quarterback and what Georgia hasn't had has been a big story this year. I am fascinated to see what Newman does in this game.
Yeah, the thing about Jamie Newman was he wasn't fitting in. He wasn't part of the reason he left was he wasn't the guy. If he was the guy, then Todd Monken wouldn't have been trying to recruit JT Daniels out of the transfer portal. So I feel like had he stayed, I think the offense would not have been what we see right now, which is going to be attractive to so many more recruits. I think the whole reason you hired Todd Monken was to bring in an NFL style offense that led the NFL in 2018 in passing yardage and set franchise records with the Tampa Bay Bucks, not to run more read option and throw it 15 or 20 times. You'd been doing that with Jake Fromm and it wasn't cutting it. You were one of the people that were frustrated by it. I at times was frustrated. When Jake needed to throw 30 or 35 and throw for 300 on Alabama, he did. And, once again, the defense faltered twice. That's the most amazing thing to me is as celebrated as the defense is, as much of a guru as Kirby really is on defense. It was the defense that choked away the national title, and it was the defense that laid down in the fourth quarter against Alabama in the SEC title game. And as we go preparing for the Missouri game, it's the defense that we wonder about. And as we talk about Florida and Alabama, it was 571 yards against Florida. It was 564 yards against Alabama. Those are the worst dang numbers that Georgia's had in 7 years. Worse than Mark Richt going back to before Jeremy Pruitt. It was horrible. It wasn't just not good. It was embarrassing. Kirby Smart and Dan Lanning were absolutely embarrassed on the national stage. So we can talk, and yes, the quarterback play was bad, and we can say, yes, they should have scored 40 or 50, but this was the most experienced defense in the nation. This was the number one defense in the nation returning, 8 of 11 starters, and they went out there and looked like they forgot how to play football when they lined up across from Florida and Alabama. Florida scored 38 points in one half on Kirby Smart. It's been a bad season for the coaching staff.
When I think about my own moment that I'm going to remember from the season, I'm really hard pressed to think of much, to be honest with you, because, and I hate to be, I'm not trying to be overly negative, but, as Mike, has kind of gone into great detail in describing, the Florida games and the Alabama games are just not good. The Auburn win near the beginning of the season is a long time ago, and Auburn's given you a number of reasons not to really tout that as a very big win. And anything that kind of happens in, late November, December, feels, to a degree somewhat hollow. It is really weird to me. And, I made the comparison, Jeff, the other day to the 2011 season where Georgia did win 10 straight to close out the year, won the SEC East, but it lost its biggest games, the first two games of the year, to Boise State and South Carolina, and you were left never really knowing how good Georgia was. I hate to say it this way, Jeff, and I know you remember this year very well. There is a certain 2011 aspect to this, which is, hey, Georgia bounced back after some losses, but what did those wins really mean? There is some of that, the way that we'll talk about the 2020 team, really kind of no matter how this year ends, unfortunately.
Yeah, I guess I got to come back on something here. Everybody's going to have their opinion on that, but I don't think the vitriol for the Florida game, I'm not in tune with that. I'm not in sync with that. I can't echo that. I think when you take away Georgia's two best defensive players, including the guy back there in Richard LeCount, I think that affects that 38 points in the first half. Now, you can certainly say I think the biggest misnomer in that game is how Georgia held Florida in the second half. Let's face it, they held Florida in the second half because Kyle Pitts wasn't in that game. And that made Florida a lot less deadly, especially against a quality opponent. I know everybody doesn't want to sit there and go through the torturous examination and autopsy of Florida again, but I got to come back to that Alabama game. With Waddle, Georgia took Alabama's full front, and that was a really good game. They only gave 20 points in the first half to Alabama with Waddle. And I think that tells a lot. I mean, really, let's face it, guys. We've said this all year on this show. Davis and LeCount are the most important players on this football team. and you took them both away for that football game.
Jeff, it pains me to have to argue the other side of this, but didn't Florida play in 2019 without both Grenard and Zuniga? I mean, I don't know that a Florida fan's going to give Georgia a free pass for playing without LeCount and Davis, knowing that there was no Georgia fan who said the 2019 win doesn't count because Jabari Zuniga and Jonathan Grenard aren't playing.
Okay,
let me just back Georgia.
Let me back that.
Those guys played against Georgia that day. Grenard and Zuniga.
They were hurt, though, right? Am I not remembering that correctly?
They were actually out there. They played.
And I'm not walking back. And I'm not walking back Brandon to win or asterisking a win. I'm just saying the damnation of the defensive performance against Florida. I just think there's reasons for that. They're not excuses. I think there's reasons for that.
But Jeff, the wheel route is a linebacker responsibility. That was a scheme breakdown in the first half. They gave up almost 200 yards on the same play 5 or 6 times.
Yeah, and they kept going back to it. And, I just think with Richie back there, Georgia schemes up a lot of things a lot differently. I think Jordan in the middle causes maybe that wheel route. As much as you know college football, Michael, it takes a while to get that wheel route off. You have to wait for that guy to drift into the flat. And, Kyle Trask might have a little bit more 18-wheeler semi-headlights coming his way. The Florida game's done. It's buried, but I'm just coming back on that damnation of the defensive performance there in that Florida game. I think if you take away the 2 best defensive players that Alabama has, the 2 best defensive players that Florida has, I think it limits you against the high-powered, trigger-happy offense.
Let me change the subject here because I want to get one more thing in before we're done. It's Cover 4 Line presented by Georgia Farm Bureau. SEC makes a big announcement today, big financial windfall coming the way of the conference as they sign a new television deal. That means the CBS on SEC, the SEC on CBS era about to come to an end. New primetime games on ABC, and obviously the full run of SEC games now on the ESPN family of networks. Mike, you've been around the SEC for a long time. I'm curious if you know where I'm coming from on this. I'm actually a little sad about this. I think the SEC on CBS is a really good TV product, and I think that sports feel bigger on CBS. I think ESPN, for whatever reason, has a way of making sports feel small. Monday Night Football feels smaller to me than any of the other broadcast offerings the NFL does. I think the NBA on TNT feels bigger than the NBA on ESPN does. There's something about the way in which ESPN covers sports that makes it seem very cable. And the ESPN not being on CBS anymore, to me, is a little disappointing. Even if you say, well, it's going to be on ABC, ESPN has a way of making ABC feel like ESPN. It's great for the league in terms of a money standpoint. No one can deny that. But I'm going to miss that great theme music. I want to miss the pageantry of CBS. When this is over, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to be a little sad about it.
Yeah, I like the tradition there, B. I like where you're going with that. I will say, though, maybe more Kirk Herbstreit, right? And I think Kirk does a great job with games and less Gary Danielson. And I know that he frustrated some fans, but I always found him kind of amusing. I kind of like the way he needles fans and needles teams. Sometimes a little bit much. He might be a little much for some people, but
what must that be like?
Yeah. I think that, maybe it's because CBS isn't just sports. And so it does feel special. Whereas, in an ESPN family, it does feel like it kind of gets, I don't want to say lost in the shuffle, but just another sporting event on that sporting channel, right?
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. What do you think about it, Connor? You're a sports TV obsessive, so to speak. What do you think about that?
I think if they bring in Fowler and Herbstreit to call the SEC game of the week every week, and I don't know if they're going to do that, I imagine it would have a similar level of grandness that you sort of see. However, that's not what I want to see. Bring back the Booger-mobile. I want Booger McFarland back in the Booger-mobile. I want Joe Test. I want just the two of them. Joe Test in the booth by himself. Booger down there on the field blocking fans view. That is what I want. I want Joe Test screaming for a 2nd and 4-yard run. I want Booger. If I'm the Tennessee Titans here, if I'm the Tennessee Volunteers here, if he's calling football games again, that's what I want. I want Booger and Test.
Yeah, I mean, Jeff, that is the thing, is that people do seem to want Gary Danielson replaced. I think people really like Brad Nessler, and people have kind of always liked the CBS play-by-play guy. People loved Vern Lundquist. They loved Sean McDonough, I would say. I wouldn't say love McDonough, but they liked McDonough even before that. It's Danielson in recent years that people have had a little bit of a problem with. Who do you think the best possible big name to put in that color analyst chair would be? Is it, as Mike suggested, Herbstreit? Is it someone like Pollock, who played in the SEC? I don't mind Connor's, reference of Booger McFarland. Biggest possible broadcast team. Who do you think that would be?
Yeah, so it's funny to me. I think it's the conductor of the broadcast, and I think to me it's Brad Nessler. I think it's a Mike Tirico. I think it's those Gus Johnson. I think it's those type of guys that that just matriculate the broadcast down the field. To me, your analyst, I think that would be Kirk Herbstreit. I would agree with the panel here. For me though, I think if I'm interpreting this correctly, college football will leave CBS as a whole unless CBS goes after the Pac-12 or the ACC or something else like that.
There could be some leftover Big 12 programming maybe at some point in time.
Yeah.
I'm not being funny. I'm being serious.
So for me, you got to think, and I think Brad Nessler most assuredly belongs in that discussion. I think he's one of the very best play-by-play guys out there. You would add him into the mix too, because I think he could just walk over to CBS and maybe cover the second game of the week or the night game or the early game right there. For me, I think maybe it's a chance to maybe get some new talent, I guess, into the broadcast booth as well. I think Cole Kubelik does a very good job. I think he breaks it down. I would like to see Dan Orlovsky. I think that's the guy for ESPN.
I can't have no UConn quarterback calling SEC games.
Can I give you another quarterback with ties to the SEC who actually works with Joe Test right now? Greg McElroy.
Yeah.
I
Mike,
think
how about
a really
this?
Good game.
Well, I'm surprised y'all haven't mentioned this yet. Mike, how about the idea that by the time this happens, assuming it happens in 2024, whatever the year is, what if it's Nick Saban? I mean, Kirk Herbstreit has said that Saban wants to do TV. It's been rumored that he might one day replace Lee Corso on ESPN's College Game Day. Mike, what if the Gary Danielson of these future SEC games, what if it is Nick Saban?
I think more likely Will Muschamp. Actually, I think Will would be really good at that. But I just can't see Saban doing that. I think when he's done, he goes to the house. But Jordan Rodgers is a guy. You mentioned Cole Kubelik a minute ago. That team with Tom Hart and Jordan Rodgers and Cole Kubelik is on the way up. It'd be great if Nick Saban would do it. It would be. I would love to listen to him. I think he's very articulate, and I think he's a gifted speaker. But I don't think that's in him. I don't think that's his, like. Would he like to maybe call the national championship game, or maybe be like Urban Meyer, drift in and out of a studio every now and then? Sure. And who knows, with today's technology, maybe you don't even have to leave your house to do it, right? Maybe Nick comes to you with, from the house with an Aflac duck next to him in a blue jacket or something. But for me, I think Will Muschamp is the guy that may have, may have gone through the coaching cycle that could be an absolute superstar.
You don't think Muschamp's going to coach again?
I mean, he's running out of places.
Certainly the Florida. SEC. Certainly he's worn his welcome to the SEC.
And you got $15 million, and once you've been the head coach, it's hard to go back. And, it's hard to go back and not be the head coach. That's why for Kirby, it's so important, that this offense, takes hold, because Todd Monken will get a chance to move on, and Matt Luke will be a head coach again. And Dan Lanning will probably leave Georgia, before, too much longer. So you've got to have this offense, that's in place, that, maybe that's why Buster Faulkner is there to one day succeed Todd Monken, because I think Kirby recognizes that you do need to score points. And he said that the other day. I thought something he said that I thought was just really telling was, he said it's more important to be explosive than balanced. I'm not sure that he says that 3 years ago.
Yeah, interesting. All right, it's time for our cover more, where we can give you a chance to weigh in after we've done our cover 4. We'll do a little cover more here. We'll squeeze in a couple questions and comments here for a moment. DogFan3 says Steve Spurrier would be hilarious. I think Spurrier is the example of the kind of guy who actually really doesn't want to be that committed, although Herbstreit says he thinks that maybe one day Saban might want to. But Center Point Media also agreeing that Spurrier would be kind of fun to see on these broadcasts.
Hey, BA, what about Manning? What about Peyton Manning? While we're reaching for the ultimate, wouldn't Peyton Manning be the voice of the SEC on ABC? How about that one?
Yeah, I mean, I'd obviously, I think he'd be a very good broadcaster, but ESPN tried to give him $20 million to do, or whatever it was, to do Monday Night Football, and he turned him down. I can't imagine being the kind of position where you could turn down that kind of money, but Manning has turned down huge sums of money to be a broadcaster before, but I think he'd have a chance to be a very good one.
What about Ed Orgeron, man? If we could understand him, he would be game for.
Yeah, Jazz Jackson also suggested the same thing. Mike Brandon Howe wants to know if JT Daniels is coming back next year.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I guess I probably think so as well.
He's at best going to be the 7th quarterback taken in the NFL draft, and that's assuming he lights everything up pre-combine as well. I think there's legitimate reasons for Daniels to come back and really improve his draft stock and what looks to be a weaker quarterback class in 2021.
I think there's also the health situation there too of, you can evaluate a lot of things, but it's very tough to spin an evaluation of a knee that doesn't look 100%. And when Daniels was on, Marty McGee the other day, I mean, he certainly, even at that time, could not, fully say he was 100% yet. Say he was getting closer, but really stopped short of saying he was 100% even then. What else is going on? Let me do some Facebook here just for a moment.
Guys, do you think he's a first rounder with 3,500 yards and 35 touchdowns next year at Georgia?
I have no idea.
I do.
I really don't know. Are you projecting that he will be, Connor? Is that what you're saying?
If he keeps playing like he's played these first 2 games for Georgia this year, I think he could certainly end up being a first-round draft pick, just given the pedigree and everything that he has. And while, yes, he does have a knee injury, he hasn't looked exactly like a statue back there. He's been able to move around and make some plays there, which has been perhaps the most impressive thing to me. So I think if he has what he has done against South Carolina and Mississippi State, he does that over a full season. Georgia wins an SEC East, he wins some big games, maybe even gets them into the college football playoff. I certainly think that's going to help his draft stock next year.
William Gleaton says JT comes back and goes number 1 in the next draft. Like, the one thing I want to see around JT is I want to see this offense still coming to fruition around him. I want to see these receivers finish their development here this year to give him reliable targets to throw to. I mean, that's one of the things that I'm really looking for is, not just what to see from JT Daniels, because, I think it's the offense that propels the quarterback. I would say more so than the quarterback that propels the offense. So, Mike, for me, the big unanswered question for JT Daniels is, frankly, how Georgia uses him next season. That's the thing I'm probably the most interested in.
Well, they need the football. I mean, because right now you got a really crowded backfield. I mean, if Zamir White comes back, you're going to have problems in that running back room because Kendall Milton and Kenny McIntosh want carries, and if you're recruiting another great back, he wants carries. So you got a log jam there, and then you got 3 or 4 receivers. That means you got to play some tempo. You got to have more plays, and I don't know that you see that. So the distribution is the biggest thing, to your point, and I think JT is that point guard kind of guy.
Yeah, I mean, I just think this is an offseason for Georgia where they're going to have more returning experienced receiver than we've talked about for Georgia, I believe, in the Kirby Smart era, I think, and probably maybe some years before that. And that's the kind of thing that Georgia can take advantage of. Connor, you're probably more the demographic for this. Gerald Harmon mentions Pat McAfee as a replacement for Lee Corso. Do you like McAfee's antics?
I can see why some people do. It takes a minute or two to get it. He's not as just folksy or as homey as I think Corso is. I think McAfee's a little bit rougher around the edges, but I do think he would have more appeal to a younger demographic. But that might not necessarily be where College Game Day, I think, wants to go there. I don't necessarily believe he'd be a replacement in the booth going forward.
Yeah, I'll be way too inside, but I'm also a little punchy late in the show. McAfee's the kind of guy kind of cuts his teeth in sort of a Barstool aesthetic, but Barstool doesn't play down south. And, you try to make kind of a down south sport like college football a little more, Barstoolish. I just don't think it works long haul. And I think that McAfee may be entertaining some people up in the Northeast, but I don't know how that act's playing down here. I really don't. Anything else? Connor Graham says Pollock replacing Corso. Yeah, for the most part, Pollock's pretty much a regular fixture on there anyway. Yeah. And I do think David does a pretty good job. All right. Anything else before we go? How about a final thought where I look for a final comment? Any of you guys got a final thought on anything?
But I got one. I guess I went back and forth with some people on Twitter about this today, but for me, I guess this is the time of year and all this, chestnuts roasting by the open fire and, sentiment or whatever. But to me, and I made this point on my Twitter profile, but to me, I think the best moment of the Georgia football season for me, because we're not going to have an SEC East title to talk about or chronicle or anything else like that. I thought one of the coolest things I thought the Georgia fan base has ever done is when Keely Ringo's mom had that need for her cancer surgery and her mastectomy. And what was it, $45,000 in roughly 3 days that the Georgia fan base stepped up. She's been very brave and very open about sharing her cancer fight on her social media. She tweeted out something again yesterday. She's about to move to Athens. She's going to heal up and recover and get ready to move and relocate to Athens. And she's like, folks, stop me in the grocery store. Say hi. I want to talk about Georgia football. And she couldn't wait to get back between the hedges. And I think that's one thing to think about, Brandon. In the doldrums of this year, Keely Ringo still hadn't played a lot. Broderick Jones still hadn't played a lot. And that's a lot of good things to look forward to in the future of the Georgia football program.
Yeah, that's a good way to close it out tonight, Jeff. Really good stuff. Thanks for being here tonight on Cover 4 Live, presented by Georgia Farm Bureau, from Mike Griffith and Jeff Sentell and Connor Riley. I am grateful for the way in which Georgia fans always seem to band together when it's needed. And certainly in Miss Hale's case, that was a very much needed thing. And it's great to see her seemingly on the road to recovery here, which is a great thing, certainly worth celebrating. I'll see all of you tomorrow on DawgNation Daily. Jeff's going to be there, our last chance to talk to him before the start of the early signing period next week. Of course, Mike will have great coverage of Georgia and Missouri on Saturday, Connor as well. I'll see you for the DawgNation post-game show and our pregame coverage as well on video all day on Saturday. So it's a busy next few days here around DawgNation. Can't wait to talk to all of you then. Appreciate you being here tonight on Cover 4 Live, presented by Georgia Farm Bureau. Have a great night, everybody.